My name is Sara Helin, as you can see in very big letters here. I work in Nordea in fraud management, and I have been working in the anti-fraud area for exactly 10 years, actually. So I joined Nordea in fraud management as a summer trainee exactly 10 years ago, and here I am still. But it's a very interesting area to work in, and nothing stays the same. So let me see if I can, yes, I can use this. So my topic today is fraud landscape in the Nordics, the current and upcoming challenges. And to kind of set up the scene, let me kind of introduce you to some numbers. So last year in US, it's around 16 billion US dollars was lost to fraud. In UK, it was roughly 1.1 billion pounds. And also in the Nordics, the law enforcement estimates that it's a bit over 800 million euros that is lost to fraudsters on a yearly basis. So we're talking about a massive problem that also affects every one of us. So we are all potential victims to online fraud. So an important topic. But I will talk a bit how the fraud landscape looks like in the Nordics. Also, I will show you some examples how frauds are multi-layered and how patient the fraudsters are also nowadays. There has to be a section regarding AI, of course. And also some thinking about how we try to keep up with the fraudsters and how to protect our customers from fraud. And also how the future maybe looks like and what we need to do about it. And fraud is it's a society level problem. It usually the discussions around fraud and what needs to be done about it, it revolves around banks. Banks need to do more. Banks need to do this and this. But it's not only the banks that need to kind of step up and do really good things to prevent fraud. It's the whole society and all the organizations and people in this society. This is one of my favorite quotes. Social engineering is the essence in fraud nowadays. The services are more secure than ever and are becoming more secure day by day. And still we have massive fraud problem and the levels are increasing. So how is that even possible? It's because of social engineering. People are manipulated to do things so the fraudsters succeed. That's the reality. Here, I trust you guys. So I will show you some statistics, how the kind of fraud categories look like in Nordea, in the Nordics. So here on the left, you can see number of cases and how they divide. And on the right, it's the fraud losses. And as you can see here on the left, it's this really light blue circle, kind of band here. It's nearly 40% of all the caseload that we handle. It's phishing. Phishing in its various forms, like emails, in social media, in search engines. So there are the volumes. So it's mass spamming, phishing. Then we have some resale scams, and then 14% of it is vishing, which is basically bank and police impersonation via phone calls. Then we have smishing and investment scams. So that's the top 5. But then when you look at the right circle there, here we have 9% of all the cases are investment scams. But in the losses, it's practically half of all the losses are connected to investment scams. And that of course makes sense, because the people that are victims of investment scams, they are heavily manipulated to do the transactions. They want to do the transactions, although we say to them that please don't do these transactions. It's scam. They will find the way to do those transactions. And then we have phishing on second place, and there we see also really heavy social manipulation. In Sweden and Denmark, it has been already a long time, all the cases where someone calls you and pretends to be from the bank. It's not the fraudsters initiating those payments, it's the customer doing everything by themselves. So they are the ones transferring money to safety, to safe accounts, which are the mule accounts that the fraudsters are controlling. And this shift of moving into these safe accounts is already happening in Finland and in Norway as well. So we have been also out warning about these safe account scams recently here in Finland. But the biggest losses in fraud is in customer-initiated scams. It's roughly 80-90% of all the losses. And here I have an example why we have an issue with, for example, phishing at the moment. This shows how multi-layered these attacks currently are. So if there is an SMS with a link, for example, like here in the examples down below, the fraudsters will make you click on that link, give your online banking credentials, and sign something. But then not necessarily like anything happens. Something fails, you're thrown out of the phishing page, and then you're just left wondering that what just happened. Maybe it was nothing. Okay. But then afterwards, the fraudsters have, for example, entered your online bank. They can see your information, and they call you afterwards that, hey, did you possibly get this type of message from Ajovarma with a link? And then the customer realizes that, yeah, I did. And I clicked the link as well. And this call comes from the bank. And then the caller says that, yeah, that was phishing. Now your information is compromised. We need to help you. Okay, what do I need to do? And then the ball starts rolling. That, yeah, we have this safe account for you. You just transfer your money here and everything's fine. And then they do it. And the other way around to kind of get this phone call more believable is that in Finland we have recently seen these automated phone calls. So the customer gets a phone call and there is an automated voice message saying that there's some transaction made from your account, and if you don't recognize this, press 1 and we will help you. And then the call is transferred to the bank and they will help you along the process. And again, it's the safe account modus. Please transfer your funds here. There might be some AnyDesk enrollments as well, but usually it's safe account. And this is where it gets tricky. When the customer is on the driver's seat, they are initiating everything by themselves. How to detect this, how to prevent this. And here we think that the only way to really detect this is if we can detect if there is an ongoing phone call with the customer when they are doing online banking. That's the most efficient way of detecting this. And with customer-initiated fraud, it's super important that the customers and people, that we are aware of these situations, that you recognize the red flags and you hang up the call and don't do what the fraudsters say. And that's why we do quite heavy awareness activities as well, to really teach our customers, but also non-customers, to recognize these situations, because this is we are all exposed to this, not depending on which bank's customer you are. So it's really important that we educate people from the really early steps, from the youngsters. And the situation with fraudsters is that they have never been this patient. Previously, we have kind of been adapted to that everything happens really fast, that there is a breach in online banking and there's some transactions, so they need to be really quick about it. But this has changed. They are super patient. For example, if they get a hold of customers' online banking credentials and even take over the ID apps, they can wait for months before they do anything. And that is a challenge in detection perspective. Because how do we detect something that happened 2 months ago? It's not suspicious anymore, basically. And here we have an example of the phishing in search engines. And this is an example from this spring. And for some reason, phishing in search engines that tries to steal your net bank credentials, that's really specific for Finland in the Nordics area. So we don't see this in Denmark, in Sweden, or in Norway. Some cases here and there over the years, but this has been a major issue in Finland. So if you search for your bank, for example, in Google, you might find that the first search result is not the bank's website. It's a paid ad to trick you to go into the phishing page. And what we have observed with these is that when the customer goes in to this phishing page, they use their online banking credentials to log into Nordea, which they think that they are doing. And it's a perfect copy of Nordea web pages. And then the fraudsters do their stuff. They phish the credentials. They make the customer, maybe they are in a rush or something, and they just sign away things like a couple of times. And then when the fraudsters have gotten what they want, they are redirecting the victim on the phishing page to actually Nordea.fi. When the customer then kind of thinks that, okay, what happened here? Now I'm again on like Nordea.fi. Well, I will log in just again. And then they get access to their net bank and they forget that anything happened. And to them, it doesn't look like it was anything suspicious. But what has happened with these cases is that when the customer is on the phishing page, they have tricked the customer to sign a card enrollment to Google Pay. And then the fraudster has the Google Pay or Google Wallet on their own mobile phone. And they haven't used it right away. They might wait for weeks or even for months to make the first transaction. So that's why I said what I said, that fraudsters are more patient than ever. And as I said, this brings challenges to detection that you need to kind of pinpoint something that happened quite a long time ago to be connected to this transaction, that this is now suspicious. So definitely challenges. And how to prevent this from happening? Yeah, that's maybe the question to the search engines, that how do we stop this? Should it be something maybe that, for example, Nordea is the only one who can kind of buy ad space in Google, for example? That would be the most simple thing in my mind. But what do I know? And in these cases where the fraudsters wait for weeks and maybe for months, it can be possible that the fraudsters are using this NFC relay technique. And I will briefly explain what happens here if you are not familiar with this. So, for example, with this ghost tap, with this NFC relay, it's that the fraudster, when they are doing the phishing activities, they have an app on their mobile phone that they can kind of take in, for example, let's say 30 victims. They take their cards in these mobile wallets. So the fraudster has it now on their phone. But with an app that they have on their phone, they can distribute the wallet to money mules all over the world. And the money mule with an app on their phone, they can go in to a merchant, walk into an Apple store, pick a mobile phone, go to cashier, and tap the mobile phone to the POS terminal and leave with the item from the store. So it's not any more connected that the fraudster that has managed to get the cards on the wallet, that specific phone needs to be on the POS terminal when the transaction happens. It doesn't require it anymore. So it might be that we are already seeing this in the Nordics, but it's really hard to prove that we see this. But it's possible, and it creates like endless possibilities to the fraudsters, how they kind of scale the money laundering part. And this, how to detect, of course, is if the customer is, for example, in Finland, and then there's like transactions starting to coming from, let's say, Dubai, in Netherlands, and that kind of stuff. Of course, that raises flags. But if the fraudsters are smart enough to do the transactions in the area where the customer is, that, of course, kind of makes it way more difficult. And this is really hard to prevent from happening. We just need to live with it, that this is the world that we live in at the moment. And here we have the section for the AI. It's crazy how the technology really has taken over. It's super easy to make super credible content with AI. And I have a video next to show you a conference that actually never existed.
I am here at the Non-Existent Fraud Fighters Unite conference. There are 2,000 fraud fighters here. Let's hear what they say about fraud.
I am still battling with check fraud. At our bank, the check fraud losses due to check washing have exceeded $10 million this month alone.
Scams are going to shift dramatically over the next 12 months. We will see a significant increase in the use of artificial intelligence.
The fraud trend that I am most worried about is the rise of data sniping scams, where they use information from data breaches to scam people. Our auto loan portfolio is getting hit with so much synthetic identity fraud. Point Predictive tells us it's over 2% of our applications this year.
Is anyone else getting hit by this South Beach bust-out syndicate out of Miami? It's costing us millions.
What has me most worried is the increase in internal fraud. We've heard that several credit unions have experienced big cases of employees stealing customer data.
I think the biggest fraud trend is the use of agentic AI to help fraud fighters do their job better. That is what I am most excited about.
I love fighting fraud so much. It's really, really great. Oh yeah, and the parties are amazing too.
Scammers beware. This is not a conference you want to be at. There are so many fraud fighters here.
As a hacker, I would just like to say that I don't think there will be any fraud this year, and fraud fighters should just relax and stay home.
I thought this was the fart conference, but I accidentally ended up in the fraud conference.
Well, that's a wrap on the Fraud Fighters Unite conference. We hope to see you here next year with us. Until then, keep up the good fight.
None of that was real. And it just shows how people can be manipulated to believe what they see. It's really, really, really difficult. Maybe the one with the farts, that was maybe easy to kind of pick. His eyeballs kind of went crazy at some point. But otherwise, like different ethnicities, genders, no problem at all to create very credible video content with voice. Totally faked. And that's, of course, really gives us a challenge regarding AI, that how can people know when they are dealing with something like that? That's an open question for every one of us. Then I have a slide kind of thinking that how we fight fraud based on who is actually doing the transactions, because that has a key part in this. And of course, like bringing friction, that really helps us to fight the fraud. But if we think about fraud that is fraudster initiated, so the fraudster logs into the net bank, does all the kind of procedures, then we are detecting basically break-ins. And there's like different types of things compared to customer-initiated activities that we need to detect. So of course we need to kind of consider some delays in certain processes when they do changes in the online banking platforms, when they kind of enroll new solutions, authentication solutions, for example. So there need to be some delays to kind of, in certain situations. Transaction limits help if they're also kind of secure behind strong customer authentication, for example, that it's not like just like snapping a finger to change those limits. Different types of confirmation messages that maybe comes through different channels that can help in fraudster-initiated payments. Also need to think about the customer onboarding. If online banking credentials and your identity is compromised, how to become a customer, how to open services. That's really important. And authentication solutions. That's really important because usually the fraudster wants your identity so they can do all the transactions by themselves. So securing the authentication solutions, that is also one of the core things that we do in fraud management. Then When thinking about customer-initiated payments, of course, you need to be kind of there to find the signs that the customer is being coached. They are being manipulated to do these things. And it's not only one channel that you need to you have to look at all the channels that it's possible to make transactions from your bank. Here, with customer-initiated payments, I think the kind of important thing is how to kind of prevent customers trusting the fraudster approaches. Because the trust is the core thing in these customer-initiated payments. They trust enough the fraudster to do all these things. So, for example, sender ID protection and preventing spoofing of phone numbers. That brings in so much value when fighting these types of scams. For example, in Finland, we have this, that any organization can register their sender ID where they send their SMSs. So the fraudsters cannot spoof that sender ID and send those fraudulent SMSs in between the real ones. That makes a huge difference in this. Then in customer-initiated payments, we need to be able to break the spell where the customer is in. So they are in this situation, overwhelmed, full with emotions, panic, desperation, whatever. We need to be there, like asking, are you really sure? What is going on? Is everything okay? And in customer-initiated payments, also, really important question is that who says the final word? If it's an investment scam, we are 100% sure that this is not okay and the customer really wants to make the payment. We have to have the balls to say that this is not okay. We are not transferring this payment and you shouldn't be continuing this. We need to protect the customer from themselves. And awareness. Of course, it's fighting all these kind of building blocks are connected to both of these. And awareness is really important to us, that we raise the things in the public and the customer understand what they should look out for, and also to adapt those basically really simple things, how to protect yourself from fraud. And then finally, so this is almost the last slide, not the last, but almost. But how do we expect to see fraud to evolve? So we expect to see more targeted fraud attacks. Of course, there's always going to be mass spamming, but it's going to be more targeted for real. And we believe that our defenses are basically built on these 3 boxes. We have our own technical solutions, we have collaboration with other peer banks, but also with authorities and other kind of actors in the society. That is really important. And also the awareness. So with targeted fraud attacks, it's mainly the technical solutions, how we detect those fraud attacks. But when it comes to threats coming from, for example, generative AI and technology and the social engineering that is really kind of running loose, we need collaboration with our stakeholders. How to prevent those phone calls going through, how to prevent these ads in social media run free, in the search engines. So really collaborate. What can we do to really mitigate these? And it's for sure that customer-initiated scams continue to increase. That's where the fraudsters get the money. And here we need the awareness, and we need to educate also the youngsters that they get it on their spine, how they react to unexpected SMSs, emails, phone calls, that they know what to do in those situations. That's really important. And Nordic societies, they are heavily based on trust. We trust the authorities, we trust the banks, we trust people in general. And if we don't do something about this as a society, there will be some serious cracks in that trust. And then it's really hard to operate in this space where we're trying to make business which is based on trust. I hope this kind of maybe raised some thinking around this topic. I will say thank you at this point in time.
Thank you. We've got time for a couple of questions if there's anyone that's got any questions. I hope so.
Hi, Mia Wiklund from IDEMIA. I just wanted to ask Sara that how do you see that the banks are collaborating about fraud? I mean, back in the days, maybe 15 years ago, there was a lot of collaboration between the banks and all of the processors who are providing fraud services for the banks. Do you think it's improving, or is it where you would like it to be already, so that if there are attacks or phenomenons that you are kind of spreading the word as soon as possible with your peers? How do you see that happening today?
Really good question, thank you. Of course, we can always do better, but I think it has really taken big steps ahead. For example, we in Nordea are members of Nordic Financial Cert, which is a community with several banks in the Nordics as a member. And we, on a weekly basis, we share information with each other. What do we see? What are the latest trends? What are they trying to do really find the holes where they get in? And of course, also in the local kind of sense, we are collaborating a lot, and we have lots of good collaboration with the authorities and also with the teleoperators, which is really essential to have also in the puzzle, because they are the ones kind of guarding the space with the phone calls, with the SMSs and the traffic. So it's really important. But having said that, of course, the what we can share with each other, there we need some push, that we need to be able to share mule accounts and really the detailed attack information from the threat actors. That's something that we are, for example, in Finland a bit lacking. So we are trying to push that we get it in place.
And any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you, Sara. Meeting the expectations that the Paul set for you. But a question related to the frauds, and is there any kind of statistics how much of the frauds that have been identified, the money have been managed to collect back and getting back? And then the second one, what is the share of who carries the cost? How much the bank carries the cost in percentages compared to the consumers, for example? Do you have any statistics or a gut feeling?
Yeah, we have some statistics. For example, from Finland, we have statistics that are gathered by Finance Finland, that basically everything that has been retrieved back or kind of stopped when the transaction has been accepted. It was last year, roughly 60 million was customer losses and over 40 million was managed to retrieve back. But having said that, for example, if we look at our own cases, we are really good at detecting phishing activities where the fraudster is the one kind of coming into the system. And I would say well over 90% are being kind of detected and protected from there by the bank. So that's, I think that's really, really good. And that is kind of what is lacking from the statistics. And this is also, there's different types of statistics from the other Nordic countries as well. But it's also pretty hard to label a euro amount, for example, how much banks protect. Because if the fraud is tackled before anything even happens, you can't measure how much you saved. So it's kind of, we are trying to find ways how to really show the impact that the bank's fraud units actually do tackling, for example, phishing fraud.
Good. Thank you. One more, if you mind. About then the payment method, I mean card or account to account. Card, of course, have a longer history of building fraud-related services. So are they in balance, or how do you see the development of account-to-account payment fraud now that we are getting more towards the instant? Is it in the same level, or what is your perspective?
Card fraud has a long history, and it's kind of, it has been there for a long time. And during the past years, the account-to-account fraud has really exploded. And expecting to kind of see an even more increase with these new instant payments coming in. It's lucrative for the fraudsters for sure to get like quick account-to-account payments in the fraud scheme. And I now realize that I didn't answer your other question previously about the liability. That's also something that really interests a lot of people who carries the losses. And we have like different setups in different Nordic countries. So in some countries, we reimburse a lot more than, for example, here in Finland. So there are some like local legislation and also kind of instructions to banks how to handle these. But yeah, if you are the one making the transactions from scratch, for example, investment scams, it's most likely customer liability.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions? No? I've got a couple of questions,
yes,
if I may.
Go ahead.
Actually, I've got two. The first one is, you pointed out that in Finland there's a growth of search engine fakes that are coming.
Yes.
Why specifically in Finland? Any thought on this? Why is it happening in Finland and not in the other Nordic countries?
That's a really good question. And we have seen since, I think it was January 13th, 2021, when we saw our first ad poisoning fraud campaign in Finland, and we were like, what is this? What has happened? And we even took the customer's laptop and drove it to the police so they can investigate that what is going on in here. So we had no clue about this. So that's when we started seeing these, and ever since it has been like different. Also, it's not only in the name of banks, it's services where you log in with your online banking credentials. And I think there's the key, that in Finland we have the setup that people use online banking credentials for logging in different services, and all the banks have their own online banking credentials. And it's in the flow that you need to choose which bank's customer you are. And that's not how it works in the Nordics necessarily. So it serves really well, this type of phishing activity. And we have like certain phishing clusters that fell in love with this phishing in search engines. But there has been some good development, I have to say. We have collaborated with, for example, Microsoft on this, and we saw the dramatic decrease actually since December. So we are doing some really good things for the society as well, behind the scenes.
Okay. The other question I've got is, you said that the criminals, the scammers, are getting very patient. They're taking a long time before they do something. Yeah. I was always educated on the fact that they would very often, once they get your credentials, would make one or two very small transactions followed by a very big transaction to try and get as much money as possible. Is that still the trend that you're seeing, or has the pattern changed?
I think that is mainly on the cards, that if someone gets a hold of your card information, they need to test it, that is this still valid and that kind of stuff. And that is what we see with these card transactions, that there are typically some smaller payments. With account-to-account payments, that is not maybe that visible, that it's It can be anything, basically.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank
you for
you.
coming to join us, and we're going to talk with you again later on the panel discussion.
Yes.
It was fantastic. Thank you.